All my life, I lived under the halo of my younger sister's so-called kindness. In our suburban neighborhood, she was the little darling, the girl everyone praised for her kind heart. Meanwhile, I was the other one, the problem child, the scapegoat. Our parents used that word a lot, scapegoat, though not to my face. They didn't have to. Their actions said it loud and clear. I can still recall a memory from when I was about 8 years old. We were at the dinner table on a warm summer evening. The scent of Mom's pot roast filled the kitchen, and outside the windows, the fireflies were just flickering to life. My sister, 2 years younger than me, sat across the table, swinging her legs innocently. I, in contrast, stared down at my plate, bracing myself for the nightly critique. Earlier that day, something had happened that I knew would come up. Our mother's favorite vase had been broken in the living room. And even though I wasn't the one who broke it, I already sensed I'd be blamed. Sure enough, as Mom cut into her meat, she sighed dramatically. "I am very disappointed in you." I lifted my eyes warily, but I didn't do anything. I mumbled. My voice was so soft, it was almost drowned out by the clink of forks. My heart sank because I realized she wasn't looking at my sister, she was glaring straight at me. Dad shook his head, setting his fork down. "Don't lie to your mother," he scolded sternly. "We know you broke the vase. Your sister would never do something like that. She has such a kind heart, she even tried to clean up the mess to help." I opened my mouth in protest, blood rushing to my face. In truth, I had come home that afternoon to find my sister sweeping porcelain shards off the floor. She'd shooed me away and insisted she would handle it. I thought she was being weirdly responsible for a 6-year-old, but I left her to it. Apparently, she'd spun a different story to our parents, one where I was the clumsy villain who knocked over the vase, and she was the dutiful little angel tidying up my mess. Words stuck in my throat. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. But at 8, facing the united front of my parents' disappointment, I felt powerless to speak the truth. If I accused my sister of lying, I knew exactly what would happen. Mom would say, "Don't be ugly, dear. Your sister was only trying to help." Dad would probably add, "Why can't you be grateful she's setting a good example with her kindness?" I had heard lines like those 100 times before, so I said nothing. Mom's eyes were full of disapproval as she looked at me. "Accidents happen, but lying about it and letting your sister take responsibility is just mean-spirited," she said coldly. "You should be ashamed." My sister put on the saddest little face and reached over to pat my hand. "It's okay," she whispered loud enough for our parents to hear. "I forgive you." That was the final straw. The sheer audacity of it, she forgave me for something I didn't even do. And instead of seeing it as the manipulation, it was my parents smiled at her in pride. "See, your sister has such a kind heart," Mom said, her voice softening as she gazed at the golden child before her. "You should learn from her example." I couldn't eat after that. My appetite was gone, replaced with a heavy lump of injustice and hurt in my stomach. I remember sliding my chair back and excusing myself. My voice was shaking. "May I be excused? I don't feel well," I muttered. Without waiting for an answer, I hurried out of the kitchen. My parents barely noticed my exit. All their attention was on my sister fussing over a tiny Band-Aid on her thumb from where she'd cut herself on the porcelain shards. I heard Dad say, "You're so brave, honey." I felt sick. In the dim hallway out of their sight, I pressed my back against the wall and squeezed my eyes shut. Hot tears of frustration burned at the corners of my eyes. Through the doorway, I could still hear them praising her. "What a sweet girl you are. Such a thoughtful child." Each word was a dagger. It wasn't just about the vase. It was the pattern that had already set in motion even at our young ages. She could do no wrong. I could do no right. That night, I crept into bed, feeling more alone than ever, the injustice gnawing at me. My little sister, the perfect angel in pigtails, had managed to paint me as the villain yet again, and my parents had eagerly believed it. I stared at the ceiling, the room lit only by a strip of moonlight. In that silence, I promised myself to remember this feeling. The sting of being blamed, the emptiness of not being believed, the yearning I had for just a scrap of the warmth and kindness that was showered on her. At 8 years old, I didn't have the words golden child or scapegoat in my vocabulary. All I knew was that my sister glowed with an innocence and goodness in everyone's eyes, while I was cast in shadow. In that darkness, I silently wondered what was so wrong with me that even my own parents couldn't love me the way they loved her. It would take many years before I began to understand that I wasn't the problem. But back then, as a child, I internalized every bit of it. Each praise directed at my sister felt like a critique of me by default. Each time they crowed about her kind heart, I heard the unspoken comparison that I was somehow unkind, unworthy. That feeling sank deep into my bones. As I grew older, the family narrative only solidified. My sister was sweet, caring, so good with people, and I was defined by negatives. If I got upset, I was overly emotional or difficult. If I wanted attention, I was jealous or selfish. My sister, on the other hand, only had to beam her sunny smile, and the whole world melted for her. Teachers gave her extra praise. Neighbors offered her cookies and called her a little angel. At church on Sundays, the pastor would pat her head and talk about her generous help with the bake sale, then give me a terse nod. I was invisible when I was good, and I was a monster when I made the slightest mistake. But that was just the beginning of a much longer story, one that would twist and turn through deeper pain before it got anywhere near justice. Still, even from the start, the stage was set: my sister with her bright halo of false benevolence, and me standing forever in her shadow, quietly gathering wounds that no one else seemed to see. Years passed, and the pattern of favoritism only grew more entrenched. By the time I hit my teenage years, my sister's saintly reputation had practically been canonized in our community. If you asked any of our neighbors or teachers, they'd tell you she had a heart of gold. "She's just the sweetest girl," Mrs. Thompson next door would gush after my sister helped her carry groceries. "You raised her right," teachers praised my parents whenever my sister turned in a volunteer project or organized a charity bake sale. Meanwhile, I was lucky if those same people remembered my name, unless it was in the context of some complaint or disappointment. At school, I couldn't escape her shadow. On my first day of high school, one teacher recognized our last name and beamed. "You must be the sister of that lovely girl who volunteers at the shelter." I nodded, but that warmth toward me quickly cooled when they saw I wasn't like her. I didn't have her easy smile or eager helpfulness. I could almost hear people's unspoken thoughts. "How did a girl like her end up with a sibling like you?" I even tried at first to imitate some of my sister's goodness, hoping it might earn me a scrap of the affection she received. One weekend, I volunteered with her at a soup kitchen downtown. I ladled soup and packed bread rolls, quietly putting genuine effort into the work. But my contributions were invisible next to hers. She flitted around the kitchen and dining hall, smiling and chatting with everyone, naturally drawing praise. When our mother came to pick us up that afternoon, she wrapped my sister in a hug. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom cooed. Then her eyes glanced over at me. I stood there, hands still damp from washing dishes. "You could smile more, dear," was all she said to me, her tone lukewarm. "Try to show a little enthusiasm like your sister." My face burned with embarrassment and rejection. Even when I did the exact same charitable work, somehow, I still fell short. At home, every accomplishment of mine was diminished or twisted into another opportunity to laud my sister. When I got a hard-earned B+ on an algebra exam, Dad's response was, "What happened to an A?" Your sister never settles for less. When I made the school soccer team, something I'd worked hard for and was proud of, Mom's only comment was, "Just don't let it interfere with helping your sister plan the charity car wash this weekend." My identity was defined only in relation to hers and always in a negative light. The injustice accumulated in 1,000 small cuts. If my sister left her jacket on the couch, I got scolded for not hanging it up. If she overslept and was late for school somehow, the blame shifted to me. Why didn't you make sure your sister was up on time? If she caught a cold, I was berated for not lending her my coat at the football game. The logic was absurd, but it never changed. I was the default culprit for anything that went wrong in her vicinity. And my sister knew exactly how to play into this dynamic. By our teens, she had perfected the art of the humble brag and the innocent act. To the outside world, even to our extended family at holiday gatherings, she was modest, even self-effacing about her achievements. It's nothing really, she'd say softly when relatives praised her for tutoring younger kids or donating her allowance. I just want to help. But behind closed doors with me, that sweetness could slip. There were moments I caught a smug little smile after I was scolded for something she did, or a flash of triumph in her eyes when she one-upped me in front of others. She wasn't overtly cruel. In a way, her subtlety made it worse. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, and I was the only one bleeding. One afternoon crystallized this rising injustice. I was 16, struggling with a history paper at the kitchen table. My sister, then 14, breezed in from a student council meeting where she'd just proposed a new charity drive. She was humming to herself as she dropped her book bag and peered at the clutter of notes around me. "Need any help?" she asked in a syrupy tone. I didn't look up. I could sense the faux kindness in her voice. "No thanks," I muttered, trying to focus on my essay, despite the knot of stress in my chest. She lingered. "You sure I could proofread for you? Mrs. Green always loves my papers," she added, an edge of smugness underlining her words. My patience frayed. I said no, I'm fine. I snapped more harshly than I intended. Immediately I regretted letting her get under my skin because I knew what would come next. She pouted theatrically. "All right, I was just trying to be kind." She murmured the word kind, dripping with self-satisfaction, as she turned and walked away. Sure enough, an hour later, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. My sister had wasted no time painting herself as the hurt, helpful angel. She was only trying to help, and you bit her head off. Mom's scolded arms crossed tightly. "Honestly, what's wrong with you lately? Your sister does something nice, and you can't even be polite. I didn't raise you to be so ungrateful." There it was again, praise for my sister's thoughtfulness and chastisement for my attitude. I stood in the kitchen, dish towel in hand, my knuckles white as I squeezed it. Words bubbled up the urge to finally tell Mom that not everything was as it seemed, that her precious younger daughter knew exactly how to twist the knife when no one was looking. But I swallowed it down. Confrontation felt useless. I had tried before, and it only ever backfired. So I just lowered my eyes and mumbled an apology to end the lecture. That night, I lay awake in bed, a familiar cocktail of hurt and anger churning through me. At 16, the pain of unfairness was evolving into a simmering resentment. I felt the hot sting of injustice, but also a sickening guilt, as if maybe it really was my fault. It's a strange thing when you're blamed for everything long enough, you start to believe some of it. Maybe I was just bitter and jealous. Maybe I couldn't be happy for anyone, not even my own sister. Those dark thoughts kept me staring at the ceiling for hours. Yet in the quiet of my room, another thought glowed faintly like an ember in ashes. It's not right. I don't deserve this. That small voice of self-worth was almost too quiet to hear, but it refused to be extinguished. With each new injustice, it grew a little stronger. I didn't know how or when, but a part of me was determined that someday I would find a way out of my sister's shadow. Someday, I would see justice, or make it happen myself. By my senior year of high school, the weight of being the family scapegoat had become unbearable. I was 18, legally an adult, but still trapped in that toxic household, suffocating on resentment and loneliness. Over the years, I had grown quieter at home, learning that staying invisible was safer than drawing attention. But inside, I was a storm, a mix of anger, sorrow and yearning that had nowhere to go. I felt utterly isolated. My parents didn't see me beyond their disappointment, my sister certainly didn't care, and I had no close friends to confide in. I had no one to talk to, and I truly believed no one would understand what it was like to be hated in your own home for no reason. That year, the cracks in our family facade widened. Small arguments that I might have swallowed before now flared into shouting matches. I had less and less patience for the constant blame. Every time my mother's sharp voice accused, "Why do you always mess everything up? Something hardened in me." Every time my father sighed and said, "We don't need your attitude," I felt a little more of my love for them wither. I was nearing a breaking point. One night stands out in my memory with stark, terrifying clarity. It was late autumn, a Friday. The air outside was crisp. Fallen leaves skittered along the sidewalks in the chilly breeze. I had told my parents I'd be studying at the library that evening, which was true, at first. But after an hour of staring blankly at my textbooks, numb and restless, I accepted an invitation from a classmate to go to a small gathering at his house. It wasn't a wild party, just a few friends, music, soda, and an attempt to forget our college application stress for a while. For those few hours, I almost felt normal. Nobody looked at me like I was a disappointment. I even laughed a little, chatting about trivial things with people who barely knew me. It was such a stark contrast to home that I lost track of time. By the time I realized how late it was, my phone had several missed calls from my mother. My stomach dropped. It was nearly 11 p.m. I had never dared to break curfew before. Usually, I was too afraid of giving my parents another reason to be angry. Heart pounding, I left the gathering in a hurry and walked the dark suburban streets back home. The entire way my mind raced with anxiety, rehearsing excuses that I knew wouldn't matter. I arrived at our house and found the living room lights still on, spilling harshly through the front window. They were waiting. I opened the front door to a scene I dreaded: my mother and father on the couch, tense and grim, and my sister hovering in the background with a worried expression that I couldn't tell was genuine or just performative. The moment I stepped inside, my mother's face twisted in anger. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she snapped, rising to her feet. Before I could answer, she was in front of me, the smell of her evening coffee on her breath, her finger jabbing toward the clock on the wall. It was almost midnight now. "You lied about the library, and then you sneak in here at midnight under our roof. What has gotten into you?" Her voice trembled with a mix of fury and, if I wasn't mistaken, fear. Possibly fear of losing control over me. I stammered, my voice dry. I'm sorry. I lost track of time." Dad stood up now too, arms crossed. He wasn't shouting, but his words were heavy with disappointment. "We didn't raise you to be out running the streets at all hours. What were you doing, really?" Before I could form a reply, my sister chimed in softly from the hall doorway. "I tried calling you too. I was worried," she said, her eyes wide and sad. To anyone else, her concern would look angelic, but I caught the flicker of satisfaction in her gaze. She had probably informed our parents the moment I didn't return from the library, setting me up once again. My mother threw up her hands. "God, look at your sister. She was scared to death for you. And here you are doing who knows what with who knows who. Have you completely lost your mind?" The argument escalated quickly beyond my control. Every time I tried to explain, I was cut off. "Don't you dare talk back," Mom yelled when I raised my voice in desperation. "We have enough stress with your college applications and your attitude. We don't need this kind of behavior," I snapped. Months, no years of pent-up frustration erupted out of me. "My attitude? Maybe I wouldn't have one if you didn't treat me like garbage," I shouted, my hands trembling. It felt like an out-of-body experience hearing those words finally said aloud. My mother's eyes went wide, as if she couldn't believe I had the gall to talk back so directly. There was a heartbeat of stunned silence. Then came the onslaught. Mom's face contorted with rage I'd never seen. After everything we've done for you, this is how you speak to us. You ungrateful little... Dad interrupted in a deadly calm voice. If you can't show respect in this house, then maybe you shouldn't be living here. Those words hung in the air, sharp and irrevocable. My whole body went numb. In that moment, I believed he meant it. Perhaps he'd said it in anger, but I sensed a truth in it. They were done with me. And maybe I was done with them too. Something in me cracked. All the fight drained out, replaced by a cold, clear realization. Maybe I shouldn't, I whispered. My voice came out eerily calm, even as tears blurred my vision. Then I turned and walked to my room. Behind me, I heard my mother sputtering. "What do you think you're doing?" And my father saying, "Let her go, cool off." They likely assumed I was just storming off in a teenage temper tantrum. But I meant what I'd said. In my room, I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it with shaking hands. My breath hitched as a sob tried to escape, but I forced it down. I wouldn't cry here, not where they could hear. I refused to give my mother the satisfaction of knowing how deeply she'd cut me with her words, with all her words over the years. I took only what mattered, a few changes of clothes, my worn-out journal, and the family photo I kept hidden in its pages, one of the rare photos where I, as a little girl, was laughing genuinely next to Dad before everything went wrong. Lastly, I went to my dresser and from the bottom drawer pulled out a small framed picture of my grandmother and me from years ago. In it, I was about 10, sitting on Grandma's lap on her porch swing, both of us smiling as the sun set behind us. It was my favorite memory, one of the only times I could remember feeling completely loved and safe. I clutched that frame to my chest for a moment, my resolve hardening. Grandma had always been the one person who showed me real kindness. She was the one person left who might take me in, who might understand. As I zipped up the duffel, a soft knock sounded at my door. "Sis," came my sister's gentle voice. I tensed, swiping at my eyes and yanking the door open. There she stood, looking doe-eyed and concerned. What I spat, not in the mood for any more pretend sympathy. She took a tentative step back. I'm sorry it turned out like this," she murmured. "Maybe if you just apologize, Mom and Dad will..." Something in me snapped again, a final breaking point. I cut her off, my voice low and raw. "You got what you wanted. They hate me and love you. You win okay now? Just leave me alone." Her eyes widened, and for once she had no sweet reply. Without another word, I shut the door in her face. I slung the duffel over my shoulder, wiped my face one more time, and slid out through my ground floor window into the chilly darkness. The night was silent, except for my own ragged breathing. The windows of the house glowed with warm light, but not a single person came after me. They didn't care that I was gone. For a moment, I stood in the backyard trembling and feeling utterly alone and unwanted. I had nowhere to go. Well, almost nowhere. I crept away from the house and onto the street. I thought about calling Grandma, but it was past midnight and I was afraid I'd fall apart the moment I heard her voice. So I just started walking toward her house on the other side of town. The cold air stung my face as I walked under the streetlights. My mind replayed the fight on a loop, leaving me raw with hurt. It was a long walk, miles in the dark. By the time I reached Grandma's street, dawn was breaking and every part of me ached. I hesitated at the foot of her driveway, my heart hammering. What if this was a mistake? I had nowhere else to go. Taking a shaky breath, I walked up to Grandma's front door and pressed the doorbell. Grandma led me inside her cozy bungalow, never once letting go of me as I sobbed into her shoulder. The sky outside was still dark, but the small lamp in her hallway cast a warm, reassuring glow. My entire body was trembling with exhaustion and emotion. I felt like a drowning person who had finally mercifully been pulled to shore. She guided me to the living room sofa and wrapped a knitted afghan around my shoulders. "Sit, honey. I'm going to put on some water for tea," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but I could see the worry etched on her face as she brushed a sweat-damp strand of hair off my forehead. Just breathe. You're safe here. As Grandma busied herself in the adjacent kitchen, I sank into the couch cushions, my eyes roving over the familiar room. Photos of our family lined the mantel above the fireplace, including a framed one of me and my sister together as little girls. In that picture, we looked happy holding hands on a summer day, but I knew better now. The sight of it made my chest ache. I tore my gaze away and instead focused on the steady, comforting sounds of Grandma in the kitchen, the clink of cups, the whistle of the kettle, the soft thud of a cabinet door closing. Those homely noises grounded me. A few minutes later, she returned with 2 steaming mugs. The gentle aroma of chamomile filled the space. Grandma set them on the coffee table and then eased down beside me. Without a word, she opened her arms. I collapsed against her, letting the Afghan in her embrace encircle me in warmth. Fresh tears came quiet this time. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Grandma, I choked out. I wasn't even sure what I was apologizing for. Maybe for showing up like this, for waking her, for burdening her with my broken self. Her hand stroked my hair. There's nothing to be sorry for, dear, she whispered. Nothing at all. I'm just glad you came here. I'm glad you knew you could come to me. Something in her kind words cracked through the numbness I'd been feeling. I clung to her and cried harder, a release of years' worth of pain. All the fight and anger I'd held in for so long poured out in those tears. Grandma held me tight, rocking us gently. She didn't rush me or pepper me with questions. She simply let me release it, murmuring the occasional, "It's okay. I've got you." When the worst of the sobbing had subsided, I pulled back, wiping my swollen eyes. The tea sat untouched, now cooling on the table, but it had done its job just by scenting the air. I took a shuddering breath. They hate me, I croaked out. It wasn't what I'd planned to say, but it was the truth that hung heaviest on my heart. Grandma's face fell in a mix of sorrow and anger. "Oh, sweetheart, why would you say that?" she asked gently. I let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "Because it's true. Mom, Dad, even..." I had to stop myself from saying even my sister. For some reason, I suddenly didn't want to drag my sister into this conversation. Maybe I was too exhausted to explain the whole twisted dynamic, or maybe a part of me still felt ashamed, like I was tattling. "They never wanted me there," I whispered instead. "Tonight, they basically told me to leave. So I did." Her arms stayed firmly around my shoulders. "Start from the beginning," she urged gently. "Tell me what happened." So I did. Haltingly at first then, with a rush of words, I told her about the events of that night. How I'd come home late and the confrontation that exploded. I repeated the awful things my parents had said the moment my father suggested I shouldn't live under their roof, and how I'd felt something inside me break. The words tumbled out in a torrent, the years of blame, the constant comparisons, the feeling that I could never be good enough for them. As I spoke, Grandma's hand never stopped rubbing my back, but I felt her tense when I described some of the crueler incidents. I realized I was venting not just about the night, but about my entire life at home. And they've always just treated me like I'm a problem, I concluded in a shaky voice. It's like, no matter what I do, I'm wrong. I try so hard, Grandma. I tried to be good, but it never mattered. And tonight, I just couldn't take it anymore. Grandma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She took a deep breath as if steadying herself. "I knew things weren't quite right in that house," she said softly. "I saw little signs, and I did try to ask your mother, but she always shut me out. I suppose I didn't realize just how bad it was." "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." I shook my head immediately. No, Grandma. It's not your fault. You were the only one who was ever on my side. I hoped if I tried hard enough, things would get better. I didn't want to burden you with it. Her expression hardened just a touch at the mention of my sister, but her eyes remained full of compassion. Your parents do love you, but they've done a terrible job of showing it, favoring one child over another. It's a shameful thing. She sighed, anger flashing briefly in her eyes. I tried to intervene once or twice, but your mother wouldn't hear it. I leaned into Grandma's shoulder. I don't think they'll ever change, I whispered. They were so angry, and I was angry too. I said awful things. I don't even regret it. That's the worst part. I don't feel bad at all for yelling at them. To my surprise, Grandma nodded. Good, she said, surprisingly firm. They needed to hear it. And if they can't appreciate what a kind, beautiful soul you are, that's their failing, not yours. She gently tilted my chin so I looked at her. Listen to me, darling. There is nothing wrong with you. You hear me? You never deserved how they treated you. Those words were like balm on a raw wound. I hadn't realized how deeply I'd come to believe I was the problem. Thank you, I whispered, my throat tight. Grandma gave me a sad smile. I'm just sorry you've carried this alone for so long. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. But you're not alone now. You'll stay here with me as long as you want, all right? I nodded, a lump of gratitude rising in my throat. Okay. We sat like that for a while, in silence. I sipped the lukewarm chamomile tea, and though it was half cold, it felt soothing going down. Dawn was creeping in gentle gray light, seeping through the lace curtains. I realized with a start that it was Saturday, no school today. Not that it mattered. I wasn't going back to that house to collect my books anytime soon. I should call and tell your parents you're here, at least Grandma said after a time. They'll be worried when they find you gone. I stiffened instinctively, expecting some sort of reprimand or guilt trip to follow. You can if you want. My voice was small. In truth, the last thing I wanted was to talk to them yet, but I also didn't want to cause Grandma more trouble. She seemed to read my mind. Don't worry, I'll talk to them. You don't have to. She patted my knee and slowly stood up, joints popping slightly. Why don't you try to get a little rest? You can take the guest room. Fresh sheets are on the bed. I opened my mouth to protest that I was fine, but a yawn overtook me, undermining any argument. I was bone-deep exhausted. I'll make up something to eat later. French toast, maybe your favorite, she added with a wink, trying to lighten the mood. In that moment, I felt such a surge of love for this woman, the only one who had ever truly been there for me. Before I shuffled off to the guest bedroom, I hesitated. Grandma, what if they try to make me go back? It was a childlike question spoken from the fragile, frightened part of me that still craved my parents' approval, even as I fled their abuse. Her eyes flashed with protectiveness. You're 18. They can't make you do anything, and I certainly won't allow it. You are welcome here for as long as you want. Let them try to argue. They'll have to go through me. There was steel in her voice I'd rarely heard. It made me almost smile, picturing my tiny gray-haired grandmother staring down my bullish father and sharp-tongued mother. If anyone could, it was her. Feeling a little more at ease, I finally allowed myself to rest. The next few days at Grandma's passed in a blur of relief and tentative peace. True to her word, she handled my parents. From what little she told me, the phone call was short and not so sweet. My mother had indeed discovered my empty bed that morning and called Grandma in a panic, not out of worry for my safety, but with anger that I had run off. Grandma, calm but firm, informed her that I was safe and that I'd be staying with her indefinitely. When I nervously asked what my parents said to that, Grandma pursed her lips. Your mother wasn't happy, she admitted, There were some choice words, but I made it clear that this is your decision now, and that if they cared about you, truly cared, they ought to let you be for now. Apparently, that ended the discussion. My parents didn't call back. They didn't call me either. In a way, their silence was an answer of its own. It hurt, but with each day away from them, I felt a bit stronger, a bit more myself. The constant anxiety in my gut began to unknot. I helped Grandma in her garden, took walks with her to the corner store, and slowly began to heal in the warmth of her unconditional love. One evening, about 2 weeks after I'd moved in, Grandma sat me down after dinner. I noticed she seemed a bit nervous, fiddling with the edge of her cardigan. "I want to discuss something with you, dear," she began. "It's about the future." I set down my mug of cocoa, giving her my full attention. "What is it?" She took my hand gently. "I've been thinking. I'm not exactly a young woman anymore. At some point, hopefully not for a long time, but someday, I'll be gone. And I need to know you'll be all right when that time comes." Instantly, I shook my head, squeezing her hand. "Grandma, please. I don't want to think about that." The idea of losing her, my one safe harbor, was unbearable. "I know, sweetheart. I'm not trying to upset you," she said softly. "But I have to be practical. I've spoken with my lawyer and I've decided to update my will." I stared at her, a bad feeling twisting in my stomach. "What do you mean?" She gave me a steady look. "I'm naming you as my primary heir. The house, my savings, it will all go to you." For a moment, I was at a loss for words. Shock, gratitude, and even a spike of fear flooded me. "Grandma, you don't have to do that," I protested. "I don't want anything. I just want you." Tears shone in her kind eyes. "I know, darling. I know. But this is my choice. Your parents are well off on their own. They don't need anything from me. And frankly, they haven't earned it. But you deserve a fair chance. Something to get you on your feet, to build a life that makes you happy. I want to give you that." A lump formed in my throat. "They'll be furious," I whispered. It was the first thing that came to mind, an automatic worry born of years fearing my parents' wrath and my sister's envy. Grandma sighed and nodded. "Perhaps. But they don't get a say in what I do with my estate. And truth be told, this is one way I can try to make up for the neglect you've suffered. At least I can leave you with the means to start fresh." "Don't you worry about that. I won't be around to deal with it, and neither will you if I have anything to say about it." She gave a wry, sad smile. "Besides, maybe it's time those two faced some consequences. They've spent so long thinking your sister can do no wrong. Maybe they ought to learn they were wrong." I didn't know what to say. Gratitude and apprehension warred inside me. "Thank you," I managed at last, voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you for something like this." She cupped my cheek in her palm. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll use it to chase your dreams. Go to college, travel, whatever your heart desires. Live well, my dear. That will be thanks enough for me." I nodded, tears spilling again, and hugged her tightly. "I promise," I whispered. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, thinking about what Grandma had done. It felt as though a huge weight I hadn't even fully recognized had been lifted. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt something like hope. Hope that I could have a future that wasn't defined by being the scapegoat or by constantly seeking scraps of approval. Grandma had given me a lifeline, not just by taking me in, but by ensuring I'd be secure even after she was gone. I also couldn't help but think about the inevitable aftermath. I tried not to dwell on it, but in the back of my mind, I imagined my parents' and sister's faces when they would one day hear the will. A part of me, a dark, quiet part I barely recognized, felt a flicker of grim satisfaction at that thought. It wasn't that I wanted Grandma to pass. God, no. But knowing what was set in motion, knowing that in the end, I wouldn't be left with nothing, it felt like a kind of justice was on the horizon. I pushed those thoughts away and closed my eyes, clutching the spare pillow to my chest. One day at a time, I told myself, my life was finally my own thanks to Grandma. I wouldn't waste this gift. I would make something of myself, for me and to honor her faith in me. Little did I know that fate would soon put that resolve to the test, far sooner than I expected. Grandma passed away just 3 months after I moved in with her. One moment, she was smiling at me over our breakfast table. The next, she was clutching her chest eyes wide in alarm. A heart attack, the doctor said. It happened so fast. I rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand and begging her to hang on, but she was gone before we reached the hospital. In the days that followed, I moved through the motions in a numbed haze, signing papers arranging the funeral, and personally calling every relative or friend I could think of. I wanted the church full, ostensibly to honor Grandma, but a part of me also wanted as many eyes as possible there for what was coming. Through it all, one thing kept me going. I was determined to honor Grandma's wishes, including the plan she'd set in motion with her will. 2 days later, Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, confirmed what she had told me. She had left everything to me. Hearing it stated so plainly still made my heart race. I could only imagine my mother's likely outrage, my father's disbelief, my sister's shock. None of them had any idea what was coming. Before I left his office, Mr. Thompson handed me a sealed ivory envelope, a letter Grandma had written with instructions that it be read at her funeral. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal and began to read. Grandma's letter opened with loving words. She thanked my parents for being part of her life and even gave my sister a gentle piece of advice, hoping she would share her kind heart with her sibling. To me, she wrote that I had been her joy in her final years and that she was so proud of me. Then came the part that made my breath catch. Grandma stated plainly that she was leaving all her worldly goods to me, and she asked everyone to accept this decision with grace. It was written gently, but the message was unmistakable. My eyes blurred with tears as I refolded the letter. It was so gentle, yet I knew it would land like a hammer blow for my parents and sister. My hands trembled, but I felt a surge of steely determination. This letter was Grandma's final gift to me, and in some ways, her final judgment on the family dynamics that had caused me so much pain. She was giving me not only her assets, but a public validation. Over the next few days, I quietly prepared for what was to come. I couldn't help imagining my mother's face when she realized Grandma hadn't left her so much as a keepsake, or the shock on Lily's face when her golden facade shattered. The thought gave me a grim, guilty satisfaction. I told myself this was simply about fulfilling Grandma's wishes, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't anticipating the moment they learned the truth. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly. Fitting funeral weather, I thought, as I stood at the back of St. Mark's Church in my black dress and modest hat. I clutched Grandma's letter and tried to steady my breathing. Through the open double doors, I could see the pews filling with mourners. Neighbors, friends from her church group, a few distant relatives, and of course my family. My mother and father sat stiffly in the front pew, clad in somber black. Dad stared down red-eyed, while Mom dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue, her jaw clenched tight. My sister Lily was circulating among the mourners, playing the role of devoted, grief-stricken granddaughter. To anyone watching, her red-rimmed eyes and trembling smiles looked genuine. I knew better. She'd barely visited Grandma in months, and a surge of anger rose in me. I bit it back. Not yet, I told myself. As I took my place in the front pew, I felt my mother glance my way briefly, the first time she had acknowledged me since I'd left home. She quickly looked back to the coffin expression, tight, Finally, the pastor announced that Grandma had left a personal letter to be read aloud. The church fell silent. I rose and walked to the podium, Grandma's envelope in hand. My heart thudded in my ears as I broke the seal and smoothed the paper. From the front pew, I saw my mother stiffen in confusion. Clearly, she hadn't known about any letter. My father sat up straighter. Lily was still dabbing at her eyes, oblivious to what was coming. I drew a deep breath. For a split second, I felt faint under the weight of what I was about to do. My fingers tightened on the edge of the podium as I steadied myself. In the quiet hush of the church, my voice echoed as I began to speak. My voice rang out clear in the hushed church, amplified by the microphone at the podium. To my family, I began reading Grandma's words. If you are hearing this, I have gone on to my next adventure. Don't mourn me too much. Instead, remember what I tried to teach you by example, that love, kindness, and fairness are the greatest treasures we leave behind. A ripple of emotion passed over the congregation. I saw my father's chin quiver slightly, my mother dab at her eyes. I continued, my heart pounding. To my daughter and son-in-law, I read, thank you for giving me 2 beautiful granddaughters and for the times we shared. To my granddaughter, Lily, I hope you'll always remember our baking days and your kind smile, and I hope you learn to share that kindness with your own sibling. Lily's face flushed a delicate pink. She blinked rapidly, a puzzled frown crossing her features at that line. I pressed on, and to my granddaughter. I read, my voice catching on my own name, you have been the light of my later years. You brought me joy and companionship when I needed it most. I am so very proud of you, my dear. A lump swelled in my throat. I had to pause a half second to steady myself. There were muffled sobs from somewhere behind me, a few of Grandma's friends dabbing their eyes. My mother stared at me, lips pressed thin as if she weren't sure how to feel. My father looked down at his shoes. I took a breath and reached the final, most anticipated portion. As for my worldly goods, I read, hearing an unmistakable tremor of tension enter my voice. I have left them all to we, and I ask you to accept this decision with grace, and for my family to come together in love. For a heartbeat, the church was deathly silent. I could practically feel the collective intake of breath from the front pew. My mother's eyes flew wide. My father made an audible gulping sound. And Lily, poor Lily, her head jerked up in shock, and she made a strangled little noise like a gasp. There was a split second where everything hung in the balance. My sister swayed on her feet. She had half risen from her seat without even realizing, her face drained of blood. I... She stammered softly, eyes rolling back. Then with a thud, she collapsed sideways onto the pew and down to the floor. Gasps erupted. There were shouts and scraping of pews as people jumped to their feet. One of the ushers ran to fetch water, while an older cousin knelt to lift Lily's legs onto a pew. Anxious whispers spread everywhere. Lily, my mother screamed, leaping up. An usher and my father rushed to Lily's prone form. Murmurs and exclamations rippled through the attendees. By now, my father and the usher had lifted Lily back onto the bench. Someone was fanning her face, and she was beginning to stir with a weak groan. But hardly anyone was paying attention to her now. I stepped back from the microphone, my heart in my throat. Chaos unfurled in front of me, my sister lying in a faint, my mother kneeling beside her and frantically patting her cheek, my father bending over them both in alarm. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" I heard my mother rasp. She lifted her head from Lily's pale face and looked straight at me. Fury and anguish contorted her features. In that moment, she didn't resemble the cool, composed woman I knew. She looked feral. "What have you done?" she hissed at me, her voice low and venomous. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, the entire stunned congregation, and I caught sight of one of my cousins gawking in open astonishment and a few of Grandma's friends whispering together with pity and disapproval in their eyes. I stood there clutching Grandma's letter with trembling hands. My mother's cry rang out again, louder this time, and edged with hysteria. "This is your doing," she shouted. The pastor hurried over, hands raised for calm. "Everyone please, let's stay calm and give her some air," he called out, motioning for people to step back. But it was too late. The thin veneer of funeral decorum had shattered. My mother surged to her feet as my father tried to lift Lily off the ground. "You viperous girl," Mom spat at me, voice shaking with rage. "How dare you? You filled her head with lies and turned my own mother against us." Across the aisle, one of my aunts had risen to her feet, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Enough, stop this now." "Not here," Aunt Margaret hissed, casting apologetic looks at the other stunned mourners. My mother angrily shrugged her off and wrenched free of my father's attempt to hold her back. I felt as if I'd been slapped. Heat flared in my cheeks. I tried to respond. My voice drowned out by the commotion of people shuffling, someone calling for water, for Lily and my mother's continued tirade. I stood rooted in shock and mortification. This was meant to be a tribute to Grandma, and now it was devolving into chaos. My heart thundered painfully against my ribs as I watched my mother rail at me in front of everyone. The truth was out, and there was no reeling it back in now. Minutes later, the church had mostly emptied. A few horrified guests milled about near the doors or hurried out in uncomfortable silence. My parents, my sister Mr. Thompson, and I found ourselves in a small side chamber of the church, away from gawking eyes. The air was thick with tension. Lily sat on a wooden chair, still pale and trembling, but conscious now. My father hovered worriedly at her side, and my mother stood at the opposite wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Fury radiated from her in nearly visible waves. My mother snapped at me the moment we were alone. "I want to hear it from you how this travesty came to be." I swallowed, my throat dry. "Grandma made her decision, Mom," I said quietly. "You heard her letter? She wanted it this way." "Don't you mom me," she snarled. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not just from crying now, but from pure wrath. "I'm your mother. You have shown me nothing but disrespect." She took a step toward me. "What did you do? What did you tell her to poison her against us?" Lily sniffled, her voice weak. "Grandma loved me. She wouldn't do that to me." She broke off, choking on a sob. "I visited whenever I could." "Oh, give it a rest, Lily," I said, unable to keep a bitter edge out of my voice. "Visiting once a month to show off your kind heart isn't exactly devotion." My sister's eyes widened, glossy with tears. "How dare you?" she whispered. "Don't try to turn this on me. You're the one who was always jealous. You probably tricked Grandma, manipulated her while living in her house." My mother let out a harsh laugh. "Ha, as if I believe that. You turned my own mother against me with your sob stories. This is your doing." I could feel years' worth of hurt bubbling up inside me like lava. My hands balled into fists at my sides. "My doing." "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice low. "Grandma saw what was happening in our family. She wasn't blind. Maybe if you had treated me with a shred of the love you gave Lily, things would be different." My father looked deeply uncomfortable, caught between protecting Lily and chastising me. He opened his mouth, perhaps to tell me to watch my tongue, but Mr. Thompson intervened with a polite cough. "If I may," he interjected, stepping forward. "I was Mrs. Deller's attorney. I can assure you this was entirely her independent decision. She was of sound mind and clear intent. Legally and practically, her estate belongs to one now." My mother's eyes flashed dangerously. "We'll see about that," she said through her teeth. "I'm not rolling over for this. This betrayal. We'll contest if we have to. Undue influence, diminished capacity, whatever it takes. Mr. Thompson pursed his lips and glanced at me. Of course you are within your rights to consult counsel, he replied carefully. But I was present when she updated her will. She was lucid and certain of her wishes. I don't think a contest would get very far. My mother looked ready to explode again, but my father gently touched her arm. Enough, he murmured. He looked utterly defeated, slumped like a man much older than his years. It's done, Elaine, she rounded on him. How can you say that it's not done? He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. It's done, he repeated quieter. This is what Mom decided. My mother's face crumpled. In that instant, all her fury seemed to collapse into sorrowful fatigue. She turned away, covering her face with one hand. I can't. I just can't. She began to sob, harsh, broken sounds that shocked me as much as her anger had. Mr. Thompson quietly began gathering his briefcase, tactfully stepping toward the door to give us a symbol of privacy. I'm very sorry for your loss, he murmured, then looked at me. I'll be in touch later. For now, I'll leave you all. Take care. With that, he slipped out. My father took a deep breath and straightened up. Let's go home, he said softly to my mother and sister, putting an arm around each of them. My mother nodded numbly and moved to Lily's side. As she passed me, Lily paused. She lifted her tear-streaked face, and for 1 second, I saw raw anguish there. I hope you're happy now, she whispered. It wasn't venomous, more a wounded lament. Then she followed our parents out of the room, leaning into my mother for support. They left me standing there alone in the silent, disheveled room. The finality of it washed over me. In gaining Grandma's inheritance, I had lost whatever fragile strands still connected me to my mother, father, and sister. Justice had been served, but at a heartbreaking price. It's been a few weeks since that tumultuous day. I wish I could tell you that things have improved with my family, but the truth is, we haven't spoken at all. In the immediate aftermath, there were a few angry, hurtful texts from my mother and one from Lily that simply read, "Why?" After that, silence. I suspect my father convinced my mother not to pursue a futile legal battle over the will, especially given Mr. Thompson's warning. But emotionally, the rift between us is as deep as ever. I sit now in Grandma's living room, my living room, I suppose, and it's quiet. For the first time, I'm not walking on eggshells in my own home. The peace is a relief in many ways, but it's also surprisingly lonely. Sunlight streams through the lace curtains she stitched herself. Her familiar floral scent still lingers in the upholstery. This house and everything in it is mine now. Yet I'd be lying if I said that victory feels sweet. In reality, it's bittersweet at best. On one hand, I feel a sense of redemption. All my life I was made to feel small and unwanted, but in the end, Grandma saw my worth and stood up for me in the most profound way. Because of her, I have security and a chance to pursue the life I want. College, a better future, without my parents' interference. For that, I am deeply grateful. I feel vindicated that the scapegoat finally got something good. On the other hand, I can't pretend it doesn't hurt. I lost my grandmother, the one person who truly loved me unconditionally. And in claiming the inheritance she left, I effectively lost the rest of my family too. The truth needed to come out, and I don't regret honoring Grandma's wishes, but I mourn the fact that it came to this. There's a hollow place in my heart knowing my mother and sister likely hate me now. I wonder if we will ever speak again. Maybe time will soften their anger. Maybe not. Each day, I try to focus on the positive. I've started packing up some of Grandma's belongings, carefully, lovingly, and I plan to donate a good portion of her things to the local charity she supported. I think she'd like that. I found an old photo of me and Lily with Grandma at a pumpkin patch, all of us smiling. It made me cry, but I framed it and put it on the mantel. It reminds me that once we were a family, or at least I had moments of feeling like we were. I also recall something Grandma told me not long before she passed. One night, as I tearfully confessed how unloved I felt, she held my hand and said, "Hold your head high, dear. One day, they'll see how special you are." At the time, I didn't believe her. Perhaps she never imagined things would unfold as they did. Neither did I. But in her own way, she made sure her prediction came true. As for the estate itself, I haven't touched a penny of it yet. I'm meeting with Mr. Thompson next week to set up a college fund for myself, something my parents had pointedly told me they wouldn't pay for. Grandma's gift will ensure I can get an education and build a life on my own terms. I also intend to set aside a small portion in a savings account for my sister. I haven't told her about it. I'm sure she doesn't want to hear from me right now. But it's there quietly growing just in case. She may never accept it, and that's okay. Despite everything, she's still my sister. I don't want this inheritance to become a curse. I want it to do some good. Looking back on everything that happened, I have to believe that Grandma hoped her decision would not only empower me, but perhaps jolt our family into confronting its flaws. In a way it did, just not in the harmonious sense she wished. Maybe one day my mother and Lily will understand why Grandma did what she did. Maybe one day they'll even forgive me and we can talk. I won't hold my breath, but I have a small sliver of hope. For now, I'm moving forward. I carry my scars, but I also carry Grandma's love and her belief in me. That will always be the greatest part of my inheritance. To anyone out there who feels like the scapegoat in their own family, I see you. It's a terrible burden to carry, and you might feel invisible or unloved, but please remember that your worth isn't defined by those who fail to recognize it. Sometimes justice comes in ways we don't expect, like it did for me. So hold on to hope. Thank you for listening to my story. It hasn't been easy to share, but I'm hoping it sheds light on what it's like to be the family outcast and still find some justice in the end. I realize some people might think I went too far by exposing everything at the funeral, while others might believe my family brought it upon themselves. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Do you think my grandmother's choice was fair, or do you sympathize with my sister? I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if my story resonated with you, please share it. There are many scapegoats out there who might feel a little less alone, knowing that justice, however complicated, can sometimes find its way. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Grandma. Your love is with me always. I promise to make the most of the life you secured for me.